Good news for the 21st century Christian. Is there a God? Interesting question, but not one you can answer with certainty. You can choose to believe one way or the other, but you can't know. Try a different question. What do you really want? You could say that you want happiness. But then, you'd want to know what makes you happy. That's not so easy to answer. Your answer might change from day to day. And if you try to pin down what would make you happy for the next year, or the next 40 years, how confident would you be in your answer? But consider the following question. What prevents happiness? There might be many good answers, but there's at least one that we can agree on. Worry prevents happiness. Worry simply means knowing that bad things might happen. So, is it true that bad things might happen? Of course it is. Every minute of the day an unexpected event could turn your future into a nightmare. The next time the phone rings, you might learn that tragedy has struck down someone you care about. It's possible. You can't be sure it won't happen. Potential dangers are hidden everywhere, all the time. So if your life always includes the possibility of heartbreak, is it possible to be happy? Obviously, it doesn't make sense to dwell on all the dreadful things that might happen to us. Often we put aside our worries, so we can concentrate on near-term events, or to enjoy some pleasant times. And there's nothing wrong with that. We learn to manage our fears just so we can get through our day-to-day lives. But, don't confuse that with true happiness. True happiness would mean having no worries forever. Having complete confidence that nothing can ever harm you again. But think about that. The only way you can be certain that nothing will ever harm you, is if you are certain that you know everything. Not a lot of things, or most things. You would have to know everything, everywhere, throughout all of time. Any single gap in your understanding of the universe would be an unknown place, where great evil could be hiding outside of your knowledge, waiting to devastate your peace, your tranquility, your contentment. So, do you know everything? Can you be completely free of worry? Can you be truly happy? You know the answer. Whatever you achieve in life, it won't be true happiness. Everyone can relate to this. The richest person on earth, the most famous, the most beloved, the most powerful. Everyone goes to bed knowing that their world may fall apart at any moment. That they might not wake up, or, even worse, that they might wake up in some kind of hellish existence. This is just the way the human mind works. It might not be a conclusion that you want to accept, but unless you can answer these questions differently, it's undeniable. No matter what good situation you find yourself in, you will always worry about what you don't know. You might live forever, but it will be an eternity of anxiety and fear. Since it's your lack of knowledge that prevents you from being worry-free, maybe you're curious about what knowing everything would be like. If something were to know everything, it would have to include everything, all the time, and also in every place. And it would also mean being powerful enough to know that nothing can interfere with its knowledge of everything. If there is something with that kind of perfect knowledge, we already have a name for it. We would call it God. Don't be alarmed, I'm not implying that you should believe there's a God. It's just a definition. But, even if a God exists, how would that help you? So, let's say there is a God that knows all. What do you know? Not much. Be honest, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, or if an asteroid is going to wipe out the planet before tomorrow comes. You don't know what other people think about you, or if they even have conscious thoughts the same way you do. And from a philosophical perspective, you can't even be certain if anything you see or hear is real. Or if you're dreaming. Or experiencing a computer-generated synthetic reality. So you can't be certain if you have a nose on your face, but you would like to be certain about everything. There's the problem. Where can you even start? Fortunately, there is one thing you can know with complete certainty. In the 17th century,
René Descartes.
pointed out that your own private thoughts are absolutely real. They must be real, because they are intrinsic to your consciousness. It would be impossible to think that you don't think. Therefore, while everything else about life is vague and unclear, your thoughts are as certain to exist as anything can possibly be. That may sound like a pointless conclusion, but it's a rare piece of philosophical reasoning that virtually everyone accepts. And you can use it as a way to envision what it would be like to be certain of all of God's knowledge. Doesn't it suggest that God would have to reside in your consciousness, the same way that your own thoughts are in your consciousness? This is different from imagining a God that would walk next to you, or protect you, or let you into heaven. This would require God becoming one with you. It would mean not being able to think without being aware of God. If that were the case, and someone asked you, how do you really know there's a God? The question would seem absurd, completely illogical. Maybe you'd say something like, God and I think. God and I think. Therefore we are. So this line of reasoning doesn't prove that there's a God, but it does indicate that your only hope for true happiness is a God that will be in your consciousness and become one with you. That sounds like a nice situation, but it comes with a sobering consequence. If God should reside in your consciousness so that you know what God knows, it also implies that God would have to know what is in your mind. Every thought that has passed through your mind since you first started thinking. That includes your good thoughts, but also the not so good, mean-spirited, hateful, rotten, disgusting thoughts, every evil you have ever considered. This means that to hope for happiness is really to hope that God and you will be one, and that means hoping that God will endure all your faults. It is to hope that a God that knows perfection will suffer for you so that you can be free of worry and live in heaven. That's a rather profound concept, isn't it? But let's be cautious. Is this too much to hope for? That's a fair question. Consider the following. Why would a God that intends for you to live in heaven require you to go through your current life of uncertainty, worry, pain, and suffering? In other words, is there any explanation for why a loving God would create the world that you see around you? This may appear to be a logical impasse, a conundrum. Is it foolishness to even hope that a loving God will save you? Your new understanding of heaven provides an answer to this issue, however. Since you know that heaven only makes sense if it is a place where you know everything, that implies that there would be things that you can't do in heaven. That may not sound right at first, but let me explain. If you're in heaven, and you know everything, then clearly it would be impossible for you to learn anything new. You'd never be surprised again, you'd never wonder about anything, or be in awe of anything. In particular, if you're in heaven, then you would no longer be able to imagine what God is like. That would be impossible because you'd know exactly what God is like. You'd know everything there is to know about God, and the idea of hoping for it would no longer make any sense. So, if you want that experience, the experience of appreciating God from an environment in which you don't even know if God exists, that's something you need to do in this life. If you find yourself in heaven, it will be too late. That opportunity will be gone, forever. Another thing you wouldn't be able to do in heaven is to love other people unconditionally. Once you're in heaven, you'll know everything about everybody. You'll know all the conditions. You'll understand exactly why they did whatever they did. So again, this current life offers a unique opportunity. If you want to know what it feels like to befriend someone that you don't trust, do it now. Do it in this life. This is the time when you can forgive someone, even when they don't seem to deserve forgiveness. In this life, you can reach out to other people who might be just as uncertain and worried as you are. So, here are two things that can't happen in heaven, they can only happen in a world of uncertainty and doubt. Do they justify the need for you to live in such a world? Try them out and see for yourself. Most people who do so say the answer is absolutely yes. They generate spectacular feelings, joyous emotions that persist throughout life, and maybe, even, after life is over. For many, these are the experiences that make life worth living. Therefore, your current life is not logically incompatible with a loving God. There is no logical impasse. So, it is not possible to prove that God does not exist. But of course, remember, it also does not prove that God does exist. Logic won't answer that question. To hope for God requires faith. What can we conclude from this line of reasoning? First, you will never be truly happy unless there's an infinitely knowledgeable God that will accept your faults and become one with you. That is the only way that you can know what God knows and be free from all worry and fear. Secondly, you can choose to ignore this possibility or to hope for it. And third, if you choose to hope, you'll want to spend your days worshiping God and loving others the way you love yourself. Perhaps you recognize these conclusions as the principles of Christianity. But notice that today, we just derived them without relying on any assumptions, scriptures, feelings in your heart, prophecies, or historical events. We made no reference to Jewish history, or Jesus, or miracles. No knowledge of the Bible was necessary. Anyone, anywhere, can discover these principles simply by examining their thoughts with honesty and reason. The traditional presentation of Christianity is based on the Bible. And while the Bible doesn't offer a logical basis for belief, it does describe the very same principles. And it describes them by using stories, poetry, wisdom, and imagery that have spoken to millions of people around the world. It portrays a perfect God, suffering to free humans from their lives of worry and fear. It explains the implications and significance of these concepts through events that humans experience in ordinary life: birth, death, triumph, failure, love, and sacrifice. But the Bible has not been an easy resource to use. Its origins are not clear. It has undergone numerous, complex, translations. It has many outdated cultural references and apparent contradictions. And there is no guidance about which stories, many of which involve fantastic, supernatural events, are expected to be taken literally or figuratively. These problems are especially hard to deal with, because the Bible also presents itself as a self-validating, authoritative text, the direct Word of God. It presents itself as dogma that must be believed without question. Gaps in logic are brushed off as mysteries of the faith that cannot be explained. For centuries, this has not been a big problem. People used to be receptive to the idea that a book very well could be the direct Word of God, an authority that requires no proof or validation. But times are changing. Books are everywhere. The Bible is just one more on the shelf, often next to other books that also claim to be the one and only Word of God. Newspapers, magazines, radio, and TV spread ideas like wildfire. And with the advent of digital computing and its related electronic media, anyone can publish anything, anywhere, anytime. Literacy is no longer a sufficient skill to succeed in life. Success requires knowing how to question ideas, to check data sources, consider alternatives, and remain objective. It's the 21st century, and people are thinking critically. This isn't a fad. It's not going away. It's a necessary step if civilization is going to survive into the information age. Statistics appear to confirm this trend. Interest in faith has dropped at an unprecedented rate in recent decades. The time for religions that depend on dogmatic belief, emotional appeals, or mysticism is ending. People want ideas that are based on substance. The good news is that Christianity stands up to rigorous analysis and can be shared through reasoned, logical discussions that will resonate with critical thinkers of today and the future. If you're a Christian, hopefully you find this encouraging and even liberating. You can still have the beautiful stories of the Bible, but there's no longer any reason to argue about whether they are metaphors or historical records. Instead, you can concentrate on following the great commandments that Jesus may have articulated, but which you also derived through rational thinking. 500 years ago, some Christians took the bold step of translating the Bible from Latin, a form that had served Christendom for over 1,000 years. Many in the Church considered rewriting the Word of God in a different language to be heresy, and they feared for the future of the faith. But the message of the gospel survived, and in fact, it has thrived. We are the beneficiaries of that work. Today, everyone can read the scriptures, study them on their own, and discuss them with their peers. Now, is it our turn to translate the principles of Christianity into a new language? A language of logic and reasoning. A language that will reach critical thinkers of today and the generations to come? If you love the traditional presentation, this may be an uncomfortable challenge for you. But if that's what it will take to share Christianity with the future, are you willing to be uncomfortable? The world is changing, but the principles of Christianity remain relevant. They no longer need to be hidden by mystic beliefs. Instead, there is a path of logical reasoning by which anyone can understand them. Are you willing to help others find the path?